HRU? IMAO, giving an acronym, is the easiest way to make something sound very cool and popular. DINK, or dual income no kids, this term was actually coined by marketers. You give them a name, give them a character, and they will behave the way you want them to. No wonders that it started with a slightly negative connotation. DINK couples were supposed to be people who are very superficial, materialistic, and obviously rich, who do not want to take the responsibility of children. However, in the past decade or so, this lifestyle has become more accepted amongst people. People are adopting the DINK lifestyle with more comfort and ease. And in fact, they like to call themselves child-free. Now, we need to understand that child-free is very different from childless, especially in this world where childlessness is virtually impossible. We have IVF, we have surrogacy, we have the option of adoption. So these individuals, DINK couples, they like to call themselves child-free by choice. But think about it. We as a species are choosing not to reproduce. Isn't that against the order of nature? Do we not owe it to our unborn future children to give them a life? What will happen to the family structure if people started to decide to not have kids? Would it collapse? And what happens to these couples as they age? Are their lives filled with regret? So let's try to find some answers to these questions. Procreation. This is why life exists. This is the driving force behind evolution. The fittest survive so that they can pass on their genes to their progeny. But do we have an instinct to procreate? I mean, is there something on a neural level or a hormonal level that tells us that this is the time to become a parent now? Well, research says that animals, including human beings, do not have an instinct to procreate. We do have a sex drive which tells us to mate, but we do not have a mechanism that tells us that, okay, now it's time to have a baby. Then you'd say that what about the ticking biological clock? A lot of people say that they felt this innate desire, some kind of drive that came from within, that they should have a baby. Again, studies suggest that this biological clock is actually a learned phenomenon. We learn it from the society. We learn what role we are supposed to play at what age from the society. For example, we know that world over, the age of first childbirth is shifting. Earlier, women used to want to become mothers in their 20s. And now, the biological clock starts ticking in their 30s. So this is a shifting trend in our culture. It's not a biological clock, it's a societal clock. The counter-argument is that the sex drive itself is the reproductive drive, just like eating. I mean, animals do not eat because they're thinking about nutrition. They eat because their bodies tell them to, and that leads to nourishment. Similarly, animals, including human beings, do not mate because they're thinking about reproduction. They do it because their bodies tell them to, and then that leads to reproduction. So we can safely conclude that we are born with a reproductive or a sex drive that matures as that starts becoming operational as we become mature. And as far as child-free couples are concerned, they are not fighting against this drive. In fact, hypothetically, they have more time and energy to indulge in this drive than people who have children. See a lot of nodding heads. Right. Secondly, is it even possible for us to do something which is against nature? I mean, the same nature that has given us this reproductive drive has also given us the intelligence to figure out ways to prevent childbirth and the intelligence or free will to choose these ways. If you say that contraception is unnatural, then so is cooking our food. So our consciousness, awareness, intelligence, free will, nothing operates outside of the laws of nature. Man is nature. All our choices are natural. There's no man versus nature. So is the choice to stay child-free. Now, I was talking about this with a colleague, and she mentioned that if she happened to tell her parents that she's thinking about, being child-free, her parents would say that you're such a thankless person. That means that we should be grateful to our parents for giving us this life. Now, I don't know how many of us would do that, but let's look at procreation from an ethical perspective. How good or bad it is to bring a person into this world. Around 2500 years ago, Lord Buddha proposed that the misery of mankind is death and disease. And guess what leads to death and disease? Yes, birth. Birth is the root cause of man's misery. Nirvana or moksha refers to getting rid of this cycle of birth and death. Too forward for his time. But this philosophy of antinatalism has some credibility to it. Antinatalism refers to giving a negative value to birth. Basically, the presumption is that life itself is a painful event. A Norwegian philosopher, Peter Zoff, he said that we know too much. We want to live, but because of the way we have evolved, we are the only species that is aware of its own mortality. That makes the life of conscious living beings tragic. Another philosopher, Julio Cabrera, says that procreation is actually unethical because we are creating an individual and sending him on a one-way road towards death and pain. In a world where there is no justice, no meaning, we expect it. And in a world where it is impossible to be nice to everyone, to be moral towards everyone. Antinatalists argue that non-existence is better than a painful existence. But you would say that life isn't so bad. I mean, we all sitting here, we look forward to life. Yes, there is a lot of painful stuff, disease, heartbreak, exams, a lot of other things. But we endure these. We endure the pain because life also brings in a lot of happiness. Right? So do we not owe this to other individuals who do not exist? Do we not owe them a life so that they can come and enjoy these things? And we obliged to make people so that they can enjoy this existence. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say that I bake an unbelievably delicious cake. Am I obliged to feed it to everyone so that they can enjoy it? No. Am I obliged to create someone so that she can enjoy it? Certainly no. Now let's assume that I bake an awful cake, which is more likely actually. I've tasted it and I found it to be really disgusting. Now I am obliged to not let others have it. Not giving pain is more important than giving pleasure, especially to people who don't exist. Because you can't be deprived if you don't exist. So, according to the ethical point of view, we can assume a decision matrix and try to see how good or bad is it to produce a child. We can see that producing a child could be bad 50% of the times, assuming that life can be happy. And not producing a child is never bad. We have no obligation to create someone for a good life. We don't owe this to our sperms and eggs. But we do have an obligation to not create an individual for a bad life. Now, we know that a person who's born into this world will suffer. Suffering is inevitable. We don't intend for our children to suffer, yet we create them. They are not in a position to give consent for their existence. It is simply thrust upon them. So from a purely ethical perspective, perhaps a better way to enjoy parenting would be adoption. But again, that's not an easy option. Many things come in the way, especially our family values, what the society tells us, right? Your own blood is own blood. You cannot love an adopted child the way you love your biological child. All of this is not true. Studies have proven this time and again. There are 20 million orphans in this country. And yet, the sole job of a newly married couple is to deliver the good news. And if the couple happens to declare that they want to be child-free, the question would be that what about our bloodline? Who will continue our family? As if the whole human race will come to extinction if people stopped producing children. 15 million children are born every year in our country. That's 15 million times good news. But is it really a good news? We are trying to accommodate 20% of the world's population in 2% of its land. And why just in India? I mean, we as a species, Homo sapiens, are consuming more than 50% of the sun's energy fixed by photosynthesis on this planet. That's the only source of food on this planet, the source of all food. One species, more than 50%. Over 100 species are going extinct every day. That's 1,000 times faster extinction rate in the past 65 million years. So maybe we know that there are too many of us. And that's the precise reason why a lot of DINK couples choose to stay child-free. They don't want to add to these numbers. It's not that they don't like children. In fact, they probably love children too much. Not just their own, but all the children of the world, present and future, human and others. And they want to save resources for these children. This is called as generativity, which is different from the somewhat more self-centered idea of parenthood. Going child-free is not the threat. Unchecked, mindless human reproduction is. So let's say that you get all inspired with this talk and you start contemplating that, let me see if I can go child-free, if it's not too late for you. The one question that is going to definitely bother you is what will happen as I grow older? Who will take care of me? Would I regret my decision? So again, let's look at science to give some answers on this. A lot of studies have shown that childlessness alone does not determine your mental health when you become old. Older individuals who have been childless figure out coping ways, other support systems to combat the negative effects of childlessness. So there's no difference between parents and childless couples as they grow older as far as their mental health is concerned. Definitely, they have less potential sources of social support, but they create their own system. Secondly, having a child does not ensure that you will have a good old age. I mean, most parents would agree that they would not depend completely on their children as they grow old. They are going to make their own arrangements. The what-ifs, regrets, bother everyone alike, whether it's a parent or a child-free person. But that alone does not mean that one is dissatisfied or unhappy with life. A close friend of mine, who's also a mother of two, said that parenting is a very selfish act. We say that child-free is a selfish act, but actually, people who make this choice are stable, committed, concerned, productive, and mentally sound individuals. So are parents. Parenting is selfish. We look at other people having children, and then we want one. We want children for our spouses, for improving our marriages. We want children because our parents said so, or sometimes for a faceless society. We want children because we want to leave a legacy. We do it for our own cause, our purposes in this life. And sometimes we want children because we want someone to give unconditional love to. Parenting is a selfish act, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. What we need to understand actually is that parenting is not a given thing. It's not a necessary milestone that everyone has to cross. Parenting is a choice. And when we talk about our choices, we are more likely to make an informed and responsible one. Thank you so much.